Opinion totally wrong as the New York Times did, and frankly, they've got a lot wrong over the last number of years. So we'll see how let that work its way through the courts. If you read it, you'll see it's beyond an opinion. That's not an opinion. That's something much more than an opinion. They did a bad thing, and there'll be more coming.
Well, President Trump doubling down, defending his campaign's libel lawsuit against the New York Times, and says there's more to come. The Times firing back, saying that they are ready for a court battle. Director of Communications for the Trump 2020 campaign, Tim Murtaugh, joins us now to talk a little bit more about this. First of all, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, as always.
Good morning, Heather. Good to see you.
So let's bring up a headline out of this op-ed. The real Trump-Russia quid pro quo is what it was called. Says, amongst other things, there was no need for detailed electoral collusion between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin's oligarchy. The Trumpites knew about the quid and held out the prospect of the quo. So what is the campaign arguing here?
We're arguing that it's quite clear that the New York Times knew that that was false at the time when they published that piece. They are alleging that there was an obvious and clear quid pro quo arrangement between the Trump campaign and the Russians, that is, Hillary Clinton's emails in exchange for light treatment in the eventual Trump administration against Russia. That was knowably false, and the proof that we offer is that there were articles already published prior to the publication of this piece in question, but it would have required the New York Times to look into the pages of an obscure publication known as the New York Times. They themselves had printed articles that directly contradict what this defamatory piece alleged. And that is really the basis of our argument, that they printed this knowing that it was false, knowing that it was defamatory, and in fact that it had contradicted their own reporting. And this is done with malice. It's done to harm the campaign at that time, and that is the basis of our lawsuit.
Yeah, to quickly damage the president's campaign, and therefore the time frame that you're talking about is very important to look at here. This particular piece published on March 27th of 2019. That was just before the Mueller report was released in April, and then just days after Attorney General Barr's summary of it. So you're saying and arguing that that's no coincidence.
No, it's not. And the Mueller report would immediately contradict exactly what the piece is alleging. And never mind that, stories that had appeared in the New York Times' own pages in the months and indeed years before this piece had appeared directly also contradicted what this piece alleges. So the New York Times knew it was false at the time they published it. They knew it was malicious, and it was done with intent to harm the Trump campaign. There is no question about it.
And then obviously the New York Times has a different take on that. Their response to the lawsuit, and we have to include this. They say the Trump campaign has turned to the courts to try to punish an opinion writer for having an opinion they find unacceptable. The law protects the rights of Americans to express their judgments and collusions. We look forward to vindicating that right in this case. Max Frankel, it should be said, who wrote the op-ed, was a former executive editor of the New York Times. But let's move on now to something going on. Just kicked off. You spoke last night at CPAC under the banner of America versus Socialism. So let us know a little bit what will be going on at CPAC. And for those who maybe don't know what CPAC is at home, a little bit about the importance of the event.
It's a really large gathering of great conservatives from all across the country, and the theme this year is socialism, the dangers of socialism versus our great system of capitalism and entrepreneurial freedom here in the United States. And that's exactly what's going to be on the ballot this November. It's going to be the president's great, clear record of accomplishment on behalf of all Americans versus whatever Democrat comes out of their mess over there and the agenda of big government socialism. It's about freedom on the president's agenda versus government control of your everyday life on the Democrat side. And that's what we were talking about yesterday. It was a great time. Matt Schlapp of the American Conservative Union, who I know is a frequent guest on yours and other programs, puts together just a great show every year. And it was an honor and a pleasure to be there.
Yeah, we love having Matt join us, as we do having you join us as well, Tim. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather.